The Baltic Sea. Shallow, cold, acoustically brutal. A Russian Kilo-class diesel-electric submarine is running on battery at 8 knots, hugging the thermocline 60 meters down, and its captain has just made a decision that most submarine commanders would call desperate, and that a handful would call genius. He is going to stop. Completely. He cuts the motors. He shuts the active cooling loops. He orders every non-essential system powered down to standby. And then, with almost no forward momentum left, the Kilo settles, slowly, deliberately, onto a shelf of hard Baltic sand and rock, 73 meters below the surface. This is a hypothetical scenario, built from real capabilities for education and entertainment. But the physics it runs on are entirely real. Here's the question the captain is betting his boat on. Can a submarine that produces almost no noise, lying motionless on the seabed, be found by a hunter that has never seen it stop? And here is what makes it genuinely unsettling. For most of submarine warfare history, the answer was no. We are about to watch that answer change. The Baltic is not the Atlantic. That distinction matters more than almost anything else in this scenario, and it shapes every decision both sides will make. In deep ocean, sound travels in predictable curves. It bends with temperature and pressure gradients, and a skilled sonar operator can exploit those curves to hear a target at ranges measured in tens of miles. In the Baltic, the water column is rarely more than 100 meters deep, often far less. Sound bounces off the surface, off the bottom, off the thermocline, creating a reverberant mess that experienced sonar operators compare to trying to hear a whisper in a concrete tunnel while someone bangs a pipe. Detection ranges that might stretch to 15 or 20 nautical miles in deep water collapse here to hundreds of yards, sometimes less. Into this acoustic nightmare, NATO has been tracking the Kilo for 6 hours. A network of fixed hydrophone arrays seeded along the southern Baltic approaches. The kind of persistent listening infrastructure that never appears in official statements but shapes every patrol route in the region, has been feeding contact data to a joint maritime picture. The Kilo has been a manageable track, a faint narrowband tonal at a specific low frequency. The characteristic hum of its Type 53 to 65 propulsion, identifiable if you know what you are listening for. And then, at 2:47 local time, the tonal disappears. Not faded, not drifted, gone. The operators stare at their waterfall displays, the cascading visual readout of sound over time that is the primary language of passive sonar. And where there was a thin, bright line, there is now nothing but ambient clutter. The Kilo has become part of the background noise of the Baltic seabed. Here's what's most surprising about this moment. It isn't that the contact went quiet, it's how completely it vanished. A bottom submarine is not just quieter than a moving one. Acoustically, it's nearly a different object. When you remove propulsion, you remove the dominant noise source. When you remove active cooling loops, you remove the secondary one. What remains is a steel cylinder filled with men and machines, sitting on a hard bottom that scatters sonar returns in every direction like a hall of broken mirrors. The seabed itself becomes the Kilo's camouflage. Active sonar, the classic ping, is almost useless here, and here is why. When you send a high-energy acoustic pulse into shallow water over a hard bottom, the return you get is dominated by seabed reverberation. The echo from a submarine hull sitting in that clutter is buried. The bottom helps the hider, not the hunter. Think of it like trying to spot a gray car in a gray fog by shining your headlights into it. You illuminate the fog, not the car. The NATO picture goes uncertain. The Kilo's last known position is a probability ellipse, roughly 4 kilometers wide. Within that ellipse, there are ridge features, rock outcroppings, and at least 2 known wreck sites from the Second World War that will scatter sonar returns convincingly. The contact could be anywhere in it, or nowhere obvious at all. What happens next is not a decision made in panic. It is a decision made by a crew that is trained for exactly this. The USS Connecticut, a Seawolf-Class fast-attack submarine operating under NATO tasking in the southern Baltic, has been holding a position 12 nautical miles northeast of the Kilo's last confirmed track. Her commanding officer has been watching the same picture go blank. He does not ping. He does not accelerate toward the probability ellipse. He slows down. The Seawolf-Class is the quietest large submarine the United States Navy has ever put to sea. That quietness is not accidental. It is the result of a hull within a hull construction that isolates machinery vibration from the outer skin, pump jet propulsion that eliminates the broadband signature of conventional propeller cavitation, and sound isolation mounts under every major piece of equipment aboard. The result is a self-noise level roughly 6 decibels lower than the Los Angeles class boats it replaced. 6 decibels sounds modest. In acoustic terms, it means Connecticut can hear targets that would be masked by her own noise on any other American submarine. She is not just a weapon. She is a listening device that happens to carry weapons. Connecticut slows to 3 knots, barely enough for steerage, and begins a deliberate expansion of her passive sonar search. Her AN/BSY-2 combat system is processing broadband and narrowband data simultaneously. Broadband for gross detection, narrowband for the specific tonal fingerprints that identify a target by its machinery signature. The operators are not looking for the loud. They are looking for what cannot be fully silenced. Put yourself in the Kilo captain's position for a second. You have shut down everything you can shut down. Your crew is breathing quietly, moving slowly, keeping noise discipline the way submariners keep noise discipline. Carefully, deliberately, with the constant awareness that sound travels in water 4 times faster than in air and stops for nothing. You believe you are invisible. You are not quite right. A submarine sitting on the bottom is not a dead object. It is a pressurized steel hull in an environment pushing on every surface at roughly 7 atmospheres. That pressure is not uniform. It flexes the hull in minute, continuous cycles, and those cycles produce sound. Low-frequency creaking and stress tonals, specific to hull geometry and material composition, that a sufficiently sensitive sonar system can separate from ambient noise. And no battery-powered submarine can afford to shut down life support entirely. Oxygen generation, Colorado 2 scrubbers, and the minimal cooling required to keep battery banks from thermal runaway all produce noise. Faint noise, but noise with a pattern. Here is the physical reality the Kilo's captain cannot engineer around. You can fake silence, but you cannot fake the absence of a 60-meter steel tube sitting on a hard bottom in water that is actively trying to compress it. The question is only whether the hunter is quiet enough and patient enough to hear what is left. Connecticut is both. What strikes me about this scenario, digging through the documented parameters of Seawolf-Class sonar performance and the publicly known characteristics of Kilo-Class auxiliaries, is that the margin is genuinely thin. The residual tonals a bottomed Kilo produces are not loud. They are not obvious. They require a hunter that is itself nearly silent, operating passive sensors at slow speed in conditions that are acoustically hostile. In most historical matchups, the hider would win this. The Seawolf-Class was built precisely to close that margin. But Connecticut cannot do this alone. The probability ellipse is 4 kilometers wide. Even at 3 knots, clearing that search area with a single submarine would take hours. And every hour the Kilo sits silent is an hour it is resting, recovering battery charge on minimal load, waiting for the hunter to lose patience and move away. So Connecticut calls for overhead support. A P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft from a NATO base in northern Germany arrives on station at 4:15. The Poseidon started life as a Boeing 737 commercial airframe and was rebuilt from the ground up as an anti-submarine warfare platform. It carries an internal weapons bay, an extensive sensor suite including magnetic anomaly detection and signals intelligence receivers, but its primary anti-submarine tool in this scenario is the Sonobuoy. A Sonobuoy is, conceptually, simple. A small cylindrical buoy dropped from the aircraft that deploys a hydrophone on a cable to a preset depth and transmits what it hears back to the aircraft via radio link. In practice, it is a precisely engineered acoustic sensor optimized for specific frequency ranges, with battery life measured in hours and a terminal behavior that scuttles the device when the battery runs out. No intelligence left behind. The Poseidon seeds an array of 8 Sonobuoys across the probability ellipse in a pattern calculated to achieve overlapping coverage of the most acoustically favored depths in this section of the Baltic. 8 buoys, 1 target. The geometry of the array allows the operators aboard the Poseidon to triangulate a contact using time difference of arrival, the same principle as GPS, run in reverse. If 3 or more buoys detect the same tonal at slightly different times, the system can compute the source location to within a few hundred meters. The array goes in. The operators watch their displays. For 19 minutes, there is nothing useful. Ambient shipping noise. The low thrum of a merchant vessel transiting the northern lane, 12 miles away. The characteristic ping of a commercial depth sounder. The operators adjust their filter settings, narrow their frequency windows, and wait. Here is where the obstacle nearly breaks the operation. At 4:34, 2 of the 8 Sonobuoys develop flooded sensors. A known failure mode in rough sea states, and the Baltic has been running 2-meter swells since midnight. The array is now 6 buoys, and the coverage geometry has a gap directly over the most probable contact area. The P-8 crew has two options: request additional buoys and lose 40 minutes while a second Poseidon repositions, or work the problem with what they have. They work the problem. At 4:41, buoy 6 picks up something. A narrowband tonal at 37 Hz, below the threshold of human hearing, visible only as a thin, bright line on the acoustic spectrum display. 37 Hz is not a shipping frequency. It is not a biological source. It is consistent with the resonant frequency of a specific class of centrifugal pumps used in Russian submarine battery cooling systems. The operators flag it. They cross-reference it against buoys 4 and 7, which are close enough to the geometry to show arrival time differences. The triangulation is rough. The gap in the array from the failed buoys introduces uncertainty, but it is enough to collapse the probability ellipse from 4 kilometers to roughly 800 meters. That is a search box Connecticut can work. The Seawolf's commanding officer takes the Q data and begins a slow, deliberate approach, not toward the center of the new probability box, toward the acoustic shadow zone, the area downslope from the estimated contact position, where Connecticut's own noise signature will be partially masked by the seabed topography. She is not rushing. She is stalking. And here is the assessment that tends to generate pushback in discussions of Baltic ASW doctrine. Most analysts focus on the detection problem. Can you find the submarine? And underweight the approach problem. Finding a bottomed submarine at 800 meters uncertainty is a solved problem with modern Sonobuoy arrays. Closing to recording range without alerting a crew that is sitting in absolute quiet, listening for exactly this kind of approach. That is the actual challenge. A kilo on the bottom, running minimal systems, will hear a careless approach. The crew is not passive. They are actively listening with their own passive sensors, waiting for the hunter to reveal itself. Connecticut does not reveal herself. At 5:17, Connecticut's sonar team achieves what the crew calls a hard classify, a contact with sufficient tonal richness and bearing consistency to file as a confirmed submarine signature rather than a possible. The kilo is lying on the bottom at bearing 273, estimated range 400 yards, less than half a kilometer. In open ocean, that would be point blank. In the Baltic, in these conditions, it is the result of 90 minutes of careful, disciplined, passive work by two platforms that refuse to take the easy option of active pinging. The thing is, this wasn't supposed to work this well. The Baltic is the kilo's chosen environment. Shallow water, cluttered acoustics, hard bottom. Every factor that degrades active sonar and compresses detection ranges works in the diesel-electric submarine's favor. The kilo's captain chose this location because it is the closest thing to acoustic invisibility available in European waters. And it was not enough. Not against a near-silent hunter and a properly seated Sonobuoy field run by a crew patient enough to wait for a 37 Hz whisper to show up on their displays. Connecticut makes no aggressive move. She does not illuminate the kilo with active sonar. She does not flood her torpedo tubes, though she could. She moves to within recording range and holds position for 11 minutes, her sensors taking in the kilo's complete residual acoustic signature. Every tonal, every harmonic, every subtle vibration the pressurized hull generates sitting on that Baltic shelf. This is the acoustic fingerprint, unique to this specific submarine, this specific machinery configuration, this specific hull, that will be filed, cross-referenced, and used to identify this boat instantly in any future contact anywhere in the world's oceans. You can change a submarine's paint. You cannot easily change its acoustic signature. At 5:28, Connecticut clears datum, moves quietly away, back to her patrol depth, leaving no trace of her presence. The kilo's captain does not know he has been found. He does not know that for 11 minutes, an American fast attack submarine sat 400 yards away and recorded everything his boat was saying. He is waiting for the hunters to lose patience and move on. The hunters already have everything they came for. 43 minutes later, the kilo's practical battery patience exhausted by the overhead load of minimum life support over a 3-hour silent period. The submarine comes off the bottom, restarts its motors, and begins a slow transit toward deeper water. The moment its propulsion restarts, it is immediately reacquired by the Sonobuoy array, which has been refreshed by the Poseidon with a second seating while Connecticut was on approach. The track is reestablished within 90 seconds of motor restart. The kilo never had a clean escape window. It only thought it did. One detail that stuck with me going through the acoustic physics of this scenario, the 37 Hz tonal that broke the contact open is below the threshold of human hearing. No one aboard the kilo heard it leaving the boat. No passive monitoring system the crew had access to would have flagged it as a significant emission. From inside the submarine, the silence felt absolute. From outside, it was a lighthouse. Here's the take that will probably get pushback. The Kilo captain's decision to bottom his boat was not a bad one. Given the acoustic environment, given the limitations of most ASW platforms, given the historical performance of shallow water search operations in the Baltic, that tactic should have worked. What defeated it was not a superior doctrine. It was a specific combination of platform capability and crew patience that only exists on one class of American submarine. The Seawolf program was cut to 3 boats because it was too expensive. 3. If the platform that solved this problem exists in only 3 copies, the question worth asking is whether the solution scales. We'll leave that one open. What this scenario teaches is not that passive sonar always wins. It teaches something narrower and more useful. In shallow water, the hunter who stays passive and accepts the timeline the environment imposes will almost always outperform the hunter who forces the timeline with active pinging. Patience is not a soft virtue in anti-submarine warfare. It is the primary technical advantage. Connecticut's commanding officer never fired a weapon. He slowed down when his instinct said accelerate, stayed quiet when his instinct said ping, and closed to 400 yards on a target that believed it was invisible, then left without being heard. The Kilo surfaced into a Baltic morning, its crew unaware. Somewhere in the tactical data network, a file was updated. A tonal library entry confirmed. A contact report filed with a classification confidence of 94%. The bottom submarine that believed silence was safety had just taught a lesson to the wrong side. Here's the question worth sitting with. If the Seawolf-Class is the platform that makes this work, and there are only 3 of them, is 3 enough? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you want to see how the P-8A Poseidon handles a submarine that doesn't stop moving, that breakdown is next. If this taught you something today, subscribe. Every episode goes deeper than the headline.